Watch out!
Bad boy. It seems I'm unfashionably late.
Yeah, and so is this video. But hey, at least you're about to get the most detailed analysis possible on Bayonetta 3. That's right, before there was Pokemon Legends Arceus, there was Bayonetta 3. This was my most anticipated game, and my channel was full of mostly Bayonetta content. I finally get the chance to talk about it again, as we just got the newest trailer. There's a lot to cover, so let's get started. At the very beginning, we had at least two very big signs that this was a Bayonetta trailer. One of these signs is quite literally a sign. That's this building that says Platinum. If you watch my reaction, you'll know I got this right away. The second sign is not so literal and is more nuanced. These two fighter jets racing through Semi-Crooked is a reference to the opening of Bayonetta 2, where the Platinum Stars got hijacked by angels and Bayonetta had to kick some tail. That's not to say they didn't try to throw us for a loop here. Actually, there's a lot of references to Platinum Games' other works. This is the wonderful 101 building in the back. Don't feel bad if you missed this on your first watch. I did too. Next, the dog barking is a reference to Project GG, as is the war scene in the middle of a burning city. The monster design we see come out has a heavy resemblance to the Chimera monsters from Astral Chain. This worked hand in hand with a graphic style of Bayonetta 3 also meeting halfway with Astral Chain's art style. If that didn't fool us enough, we see Lappy being the one that the Chimera thinks shot at it. This just helped to really get the crowd rumbling about what possible Platinum game this could be. I mean, they got me at least. Of course, now we all know what the game is, and if we hadn't caught it before, the sound of the witch time activating should have given it away for you. Before we move on though, let's discuss the setting. The setting takes place in Japan, namely the Shibuya district in Tokyo. We can see this on the building in the background. The army here also speaks in Japanese. Why is Bayo in Tokyo though? We'll have to wait and see, but she definitely knew she was going to be here. I'll explain why I think that later. Anyways, we know Platinum Games are super fond of dropping hints everywhere for what's to come. So I took the time to analyze all the buildings in the background, and boy did I find some secrets. The first one I want to point out is this sign here that says new single, Moonrise Whisper. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe we have our title for the new theme song of Bayonetta 3. It's unclear if this is the replacement for Mysterious Destiny and Tomorrow Is Mine, or the follow-up to Fly Me to the Moon and Moon River. I looked it up and couldn't find a song with this title that already exists, namely a Frank Sinatra song at that. So at first I thought maybe this had to be the former. However, with the moon motif, I think there is still a possibility for a moon theme follow-up. Crazy idea, but since, hint hint, Platinum Games is subverting expectations with Bayonetta herself, to say the least, we could be seeing a subversion to our usual Frank Sinatra songs being replaced by newer, fresher talent. Yeah, I think this is gonna be a new Lady Gaga single, and that's why she became such a big Bayonetta fan. Sounds crazy, but at the same time, it doesn't sound too crazy if you ask me. Plus, who would complain? This is the collaboration we've all been asking for ever since she made those tweets about playing Bayonetta. Moving on to other posters. This one on the wonderful 101 building says Final Bargain, with a girl who has crazy hair and glasses. Maybe this was also a hint towards Bayonetta, but this is a far more hard to distinguish one. This poster here shows three similar figures, and a fourth figure off on the side looking at the other three. This is highly representative of something we're going to be seeing as a major plot point. We'll touch on that when the time comes. This sign says Pure Eye. As we know, Baldur said Cereza was the version of Bayonetta that had pure eyes, and she ended up being the activation key for the left eye of the world. No doubt this is a hint towards Well, Cereza possibly making an appearance here? Hint, hint. Sorry, don't know what came over me. Outside of Tokyo, though, we only get 2 shots. In both of these shots, it seems to be the same area, and we see this floating island rock formation in the sky. This may or may not be the Sunrise and Crescent Moon Valley from Bayonetta 1 and 2. There's no proof for or against this, but the shape does kind of resemble it, I guess. Tough to say. It is worth noting, though, that the same enemies here are the biological ones that we saw back in Tokyo. So it's safe to say we're probably still on Earth, although these could just be placeholder enemies for now, just for the trailer. Back to the witch time. It's unclear if Bayonetta was fighting from Purgatorio when messing around with this monster, but regardless, it seems she doesn't need to fight them in Purgatorio. It's fairly clear by now these are neither angel nor demon, so she has to fight them on the plane of chaos. Let's take a closer look at the monster designs now. They seem to have what looks like demonic script coming out of them, as well as some blue Aesir-like energy in other spots. The first protrusion may not be demonic script, as typically that's been associated with either red or purple by now, but we can't put it past them since this game seems to be subverting a lot of expectations. On top of this, the monsters seem to have winged armor that resembles angels, as well as speak the language of Enochian, the angelic language, or at least something that sounds a lot like it. However, the unique thing about their design is that they look very biological in nature, with lots of green to their color palette. One even sprouts up organically from the ground in one scene. Could these be the Realm of Chaos's version of demons and angels, creatures that can change their form based on perception and the times? Or perhaps this is a fusion of sorts. Another possible theory is that these are humans corrupting and becoming these monsters. They do look like Chimera from Astral Chain, and that's what's happening to the humans in that story. We've seen in Bayonetta 1 that humans can become angels, and presumably demons as well, depending on their affiliated cult or specific circumstances occurring. We might see a completely new breed of monsters here in the Realm of Chaos that are formed in a similar manner. Something that lends even more to this theory is that when we see these monsters getting hit by Gamora and the other demons in the later sections of the trailer, we see the enemies that look more humanoid coming out of the monsters. Like a bunch of them make up these giant ones. You can also see in the scene where this one is forming organically that there are humanoid figures kind of trying to crawl their way out, but they're just forming this morph of monster goo. Either way, it is safe to say that these giant monsters are the culmination of a bunch of these smaller humanoid ones. And speaking of these humanoid guys, we see in the subway fight that they fight with sword arms. The swords are made out of glowing green energy. They also seem to be connected to either the subway system or something above the subway system via some glowing umbilical cord. Not quite sure what this is, but it implies that these gain energy from something else. Either way, these are some Slender Man looking motherfuckers. It's also worth noting that all of these scenes in this area of Tokyo have some sort of mystical field around them. I wonder what that could be. Are we closed in by something here, or is that just a stylistic choice to not put too much detail in the background? Who knows? Okay, we talked about the monsters. It's time to address the elephant in the room. The very slim, fashionable, playful elephant. Bayonetta herself. However, I won't be calling her Bayonetta from here on out, because I'm 99% certain this is not Bayonetta. This is Cereza, the little girl from Bayonetta 1, who, while technically the same person as Bayonetta biologically, has gone through time displacement and now exists in her own reality. I'll explain more later on that. We also might be seeing a different butterfly pact here, but again, later. Anywho, back to her design. We first see up close her golden cherry blossom shoes. And that's a motif that stays very strongly throughout her entire design, so keep an eye out. Next, we see her new guns, which are purple. Unlike her previous pairs, these feature 3 barrels rather than 2. Pretty neat and intimidating, if you ask me. They also seem much longer, and just when we thought Bayo 2 had guns that were almost too big, these guns are called Color My World. Notice the European version of the spelling. This must mean she's been to Europe at some point by now. I assume we start out in Europe and end up in Tokyo, as we'll see the fight to come seems to take place not at the beginning of the game, based on its verse number, although that could have been a misdirect. Color My World also has butterfly wings designed on them, as well as the Gates of Hell logo surrounded by the words, Custom Shotgun, the Gates of Hell. So, it's pretty much confirmed Rodin exists in this timeline too, and is friends with Cereza and makes guns for her. Seemingly even better guns than he made for Bayonetta. Cereza also wears cherry blossom tassels in her hair, alongside more flower-like motifs. Her hair is tied back in a bow, resembling the back of a kimono, bringing the Japanese aesthetic together in full. Essentially, this is what I meant when I mean she knew she was coming to Japan. She also features stylish vine-like openings in her leggings up to her waist. I personally love this so much. It somehow surpasses her jester-like openings in her Bayo 2 outfit for me. Her earrings look like swords with 2 gems on the sides of the handles. And now we get to see her full body and face. Once again, I'll reiterate, this is Cereza. Her hair is similar, her outfit has a similar shape and puffy tie design similar to a scarecrow, or, more relevantly, her Cheshire doll. She sounds much younger, possibly not voiced by Hellena Taylor anymore, but after seeing this tweet from Hellena Taylor, I might have my doubts about that. She might actually be voicing Cereza here after all. But she kinda sounds like Jean's voice actress to me. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy. Either way, she boasts her red hair ties, something Bayonetta was missing by the end of the first game because she gave one of her 2 to Cereza, and Cereza's personality here. Yes, her personality is quite different, replacing the sexual and mature from Bayonetta for very rambunctious and energetic. Cereza seems much happier than Bayonetta, and with good reason. See, Bayonetta was aggressive and sadistic. This is because her entire clan was killed, including her mother before her eyes, and her father by her own hands. Bayonetta was persecuted for being an Umbra witch, or in other words, a woman. She had no one to look up to and only had the memories of her mother chained up in a prison cell. So she enacted vengeful massacres of angels while flaunting her sexuality in front of their faces, owning the fact that she was a woman and an Umbran witch at that. And there was nothing the angels could do to stop her because she's so much more powerful than them, or any Umbra witch who came before. Cereza, on the other hand, while technically the same person biologically, experienced an intimate adventure with who she thought was her mother, but was really herself. It makes sense since Bayonetta dressed how she did in Bayo 1 because it resembles her mother, whom, like I said, she only ever saw trapped in a cage when she was growing up. Cereza had a mother-daughter bond with Bayonetta, and Bayonetta taught her to stay strong, hold what's important to her close to her heart, and not be afraid. Towards the end of Bayonetta 1, we see this change to the timeline, where Jean tries to stab Cereza to seal her away like she did to Bayonetta in an alternate timeline, but it doesn't work because she kept her Umbran clock close to her heart. She says she's not afraid anymore, Mummy, and then proceeds to, presumably, end the first war by teaming up with Jean. In Bayonetta's timeline, things obviously didn't work out that way. In Cereza's though, this is a much happier ending. And as such, Cereza is more carefree, less sexual, and more playful. Need more proof? Look no further than her quips during battle. Notice anything strange? Normally, Bayonetta mocks her opponents. Seems pretty out of character for her to just compliment herself instead now, doesn't it? However, this behavior does fit Cereza, who I already mentioned is more positive, playful, and lacking aggression. To top all this off, Cereza also wasn't sealed away for 500 years, so she seems to be even more powerful and have more powers than Bayonetta. But we'll talk about those powers in detail later. It is worth noting that Baldur once said Cereza is the woman he set his sights on, not a woman known as Bayonetta. I have an explanation as to why Baldur cared so much about this particular Cereza, but consider this a foreshadowing for a future video for now. Trust me, it'll be worth it. Back to our current analysis, however, I want to point something out. While Cereza seems younger than Bayonetta here, that might not be the case. This scene takes place in modern day, you see. Look at this 5G ad in the background. That means she can't be younger than Bayonetta. Matter of fact, she's technically older from not being sealed away. She simply wears more makeup, stays covered up, and has a less sadistic and more childish voice. All the rest is covered by the fact that witches don't age. Also, a side note on the voice. If this is not Hellena Taylor, I should iterate that I do think Hellena Taylor will be in Bayonetta 3 regardless, but it would be to voice Bayonetta, not Cereza. I imagine there's lots of scenes with Bayonetta and Cereza together, so they needed an audible way to differentiate the two on top of visually. Hellena Taylor is still confirmed to be in an NDA for Bayonetta 3, so bear that in mind. I'll explain why I think the two Cerezas will be meeting later. For now, it's time to talk about all those extra powers I mentioned Cereza has. In other words, let's discuss the fighting mechanics. Starting with the basics. We see Bayonetta has much more animation to her movements, bringing more fluidity between poses and attacks. This is a clear evolution inspired by Platinum Games' works on Nier Automata, where 2B, A2, and 9S had immense detail in all of their movement, including their animations in between attacks. I'm also very pleased they brought the sense of scale back from Bayonetta 1. The camera stays low and looks up at spectacles, while we, as Cereza, move freely even when partaking in kaiju fights. I sorely missed this in Bayonetta 2, where the camera was mostly pulled back and above the action. I think it took a lot of the spectacle out, unfortunately. But we get it back here in 3, so all is well. Something Bayonetta 2 did bring that returns here though are enemies having varied animations depending on how they were hit. The best shot to showcase this is the scene of Bayonetta fighting enemies on the subway. Notice the different ways they get knocked when she hits them, rather than one canned damage animation like in Bayonetta 1. This is obvious by now, but yes, we can summon demons in full using a mechanic called Demon Slave. This is activated by the D-pad. Who would have thought such innocent little buttons could do something so big? Jokes aside, we know of 3 summons so far: Gamora, Malphus, and Phantasmarene. Gamora seems to fight like a brawler of sorts, but can also use its fire breath to attack. Malphus can create giant shard feathers to attack enemies, similar to Crow Within, on top of creating literal cyclones with another move. And Phantasmarene can crawl up and down buildings, swing from a web and attack as a pendulum, and even use its web to hold enemies down. All of these summons have high levels of interactivity with the environment, such as Phantasmarene being able to crawl around terrain that's still intact, and Malphus sucking up cars and other collateral when it creates the cyclones. While these are the only 3 summons we've seen so far, I have no doubt we'll be able to customize what demons we enslave during our fights, on top of customizing our own weapons as Cereza, of course. Real quick, I also want to point out that our demons during Demon Slave have a health bar. When they take damage, the health bar goes down faster, and it seems to be going down steadily just by having them out. This means we can only have them out for a limited time, which works well to make this not an overpowered gimmick. You can tell they're taking damage both by looking at your demon and seeing them turn red, or you can look at the health bar and see it turn red and go down as well. On top of this, we can see an action command above that, showing whether to punch or kick or press whatever button. I'm not sure if these are preset and we have to follow them in a certain order, or if this is showing what attacks we're doing. I'm leaning more towards the former, not only because it makes more sense, but because it looks like we're damaging our demons if we don't press the correct button. You see this blood spatter up every time it looks like our demon is taking damage. And their icon seems to turn red as well. We should also note, it looks like we're building a gauge during Demon Slave. I'm not sure what gets accomplished once it's completely filled up, but I assume we're filling it by pressing the correct button on the command list. Either that, or we're filling it by our demon taking damage by the enemy, or by us pressing the wrong button. The best part of all this though, the return of serious mode from Bayonetta 1, and the fact that Cereza turns pink and just dances her heart out as she completely demolishes her enemies while enslaving her demons fully. I love this, and it feels like an energized return to form. There is some freshness, however, and we need to debate it. When we see Bayonetta dance to summon Gamora, there are a few things to consider. Her dance is longer and more playful, and this further separates her from Bayonetta. Perhaps all these extra moves are to control the demon fully as a demon slave. Besides this, the next thing is the symbol we see appear on Cereza's back when she summons Gamora. I believe this comes with the territory of her new demon slave ability, as this level of demon enslavement was fairly rare for Bayonetta to do. She usually didn't move while summoning demons in full, whereas Cereza has complete and total movement every time. Off the top of my head, I can only think of 2 instances Bayonetta achieved this level of control. Once during her deathmatch with Fortitudo, where she summons Malphas, and once in her deathmatch with Glamour, where she summoned Diomedes. There may be more I haven't thought of, obviously, but the point is, these occurrences were rare. But what am I getting at here, you ask? Well, aside from restating Cereza is more powerful than Bayonetta, I'm saying the symbol appears as a signifier of this particular power. In this instance, it actually takes the shape of Gamora himself. We can see the horns on the top corners of the symbol. At first, I admit, I thought this was supposed to be like Satan or something, until I took into account the context. Besides that though, in the center, we see what looks like the Lens of Truth from The Legend of Zelda. It's funny, I actually had a whole explanation on how this could represent her all-seeing eye, or the fact that she's the left eye, or that she may now have both eyes of the world, until I looked and the symbol does not appear when we summon the other summons using Demon Slave. Instead, all we see are symbols that look like those summons instead of Gamora. A pretty neat detail though, if you ask me. Wow, I jumped right into Demon Slave, didn't I? That was a big one to cover, but it was kind of hard not to. Now there's another big mechanic to tackle, so let's do that before stepping back and examining more nuanced details about the fights again. Demon Masquerade. We see it exactly once in this entire trailer, and it's simply to finish off Cereza's standard punch combo. We see Cereza literally fuse with her Butterfly Pact. I love this for several reasons. One, more visual flair. Especially since Cereza doesn't take her clothes off mid-fight like Bayonetta, we needed some replacement effects. This and Demon Slave's serious mode look more than make up for it. Second, it doesn't seem to be overpowered or overemphasized like Umbran Climax from Bayonetta 2. We used it as a combo finisher, and that was all. The time it stayed activated was rather short, as it should be. I'm glad. Now we can have a reason to use torture attacks again. No, really. Not only are they back, but we can torture attack a bunch of enemies at once. Look at her snap her finger. Look at her! But yeah, Demon Masquerade seems superior to Umbran Climax in every way other than power, and I couldn't have asked for anything better. There is one odd thing to talk about here though. Who is this butterfly? Now we can't completely rule out Madama Butterfly. The skin color might just be a lighting thing, and the change in her design and clothing could just be that, like Cereza and Bayonetta, she likes to keep her appearance fresh. The reasons I doubt this though are twofold. The weaker argument is that she didn't change her appearance between Bayonetta 1 and 2, so why would she now? Okay, sure, kind of valid, but can be argued against. The stronger argument is that if we look at her knuckles, this butterfly does not have thorns, or even a darker middle finger. These were pretty vital characteristics for Madama Butterfly, so does this definitively mean this isn't her? No, not at all. She could have had some important differences to her story as well that affected her physical appearance, similarly to Cereza versus Bayonetta. Is it more likely this isn't Madama Butterfly though? Hard to say. For now, I'll just refer to her as Cereza's Butterfly Pact. Okay, back to the nuances in these fights. Witch Time has received a visual overhaul. It has more particle effects, bokeh, sparkles, and swishing streaks that seem to follow the angle you dodged at. I personally love this, and can already tell it'll make landing these even more satisfying. We can also tell by this point we've unlocked the charge shot. If this is early in the game, we may start with it, but this may not be early in the game. Who knows? Next, for some reason, regardless of the portions in these fights we see playing, the right side of the screen says verse 7. I have a feeling all of these different set pieces are not the same fight, and they put this verse 7 mark here to let us have a taste of what it'll look like when we're fighting. It makes sense, as this can avoid spoilers for when these fights take place. Speaking of different set pieces, just FYI, we cannot perform Demon Slave in enclosed spaces, as we see in the subway fight. What we probably can perform is Demon Masquerade. This also makes me wonder, can we masquerade with other infernal demons besides our Butterfly Pact? I think we will. After all, different weapons are made from different demons, and some weapons summon completely different wicked weaves than others. We will probably be able to masquerade as the demons we use in our wicked weaves, or as the demons our weapons are made from. I also question if the masquerade power has anything to do with Aesir's power. Cereza's butterfly wings glow with a genius blue color, much like Aesir, so there may be a connection, even if it's unlikely. Maybe Cereza finally inherited both eyes of the world like Rosa predicted. It's possible, but further proof would be needed. Side note, we can see the Butterfly Pact's fists open back up once they finish pummeling. Neat. I know we talked about Demon Slave a lot already, but there's still so much more to question. In almost every clip Demon Slave is activated, we see Cereza dancing to command her demons. All but one scene. This one here, where we see Cereza running while Gamora attacks. We could be seeing an unchained function, similar to astral chains, in action here. That would be fun, and a great way to move Cereza when she's in a dangerous spot on the map. While performing Demon Slave, I mentioned Cereza goes into serious mode. Something else I love about this is how she glows pink. Fun fact, I really wanted purple, pink, and black to be the new color scheme for Bayonetta in Bayonetta 3. And I pretty much got my wish. The last thing we see is Cereza hopping onto a rocket that shatters as it fires off to ram the enemy. So much detail in every square inch of this combat, man, it's insane. But the details don't stop there. Now we get to see the logo, and there's a lot to unpack here. I probably spent more time analyzing each frame of this logo than I should have, but I've come up with some crazy finds, so let's go in order. It starts off as standard fare. One emblem, the Bayonetta logo completely intact, and shadows all around it. Then, suddenly, something disrupts the emblem, and every hidden emblem around it. I believe this represents some major event occurring that affects one reality, and in turn, causes a ripple effect among every reality. My personal theory for this is that all of the realities became affected when Bayonetta took Cereza back to her time in the first game. And my backup theory has to do with the Bayonetta we see dying in the first trailer. Moving on. As the shot lands, the logo changes very briefly to RGB, or red, green, blue. 3 different primary colors. Okay, so 3 different main timelines get shaken. The logo itself begins crumbling downward on its edges, and the emblem gets shattered in half. This reality is shattered and broken, and suddenly, a ripple of other emblems become visible all around it, seemingly going on forever in either direction. This implies one reality shattering is causing ripple effects to every reality. Those realities eventually go back into the shadows, while the 2 closest realities remain there to guard the central reality. This implies, once again, 3 main realities we will be focusing on. Matter of fact, we know these 3 realities quite well. Consider this another foreshadowing for a separate video I'll be making, where I explain all of these realities very clearly for you. For now though, let's just summarize this. A reality was shattered, and the ripple of that is felt across all realities, some more than others. The 2 realities closest to the fractured reality feel it the most, and seem to be about to intervene to support. The shape these realities take here in the official logo is the triple moon symbol, which is affiliated with the goddess Hecate to represent the 3 stages of womanhood: mother, maiden, and crone. We already know our mother's reality, the center moon, is Bayonetta from the first 2 games, as Cereza calls her mummy throughout the entire first game. And the maiden is Cereza, who we're seeing here in Bayonetta 3, being represented by the left moon. As for the crone, the right moon, That requires some further explanation that I'll need to include in that separate video I mentioned earlier, but this is indeed the Bayonetta we see perish in the first trailer of Bayonetta 3. Either way, I think I have you all on the same page now. Just don't forget to keep an eye out for my video explaining all of this in great detail soon. Post logo, we're now treated to Cereza riding atop Gamora as we scale buildings to chase a monster that's somehow several times the size of Gamora? That's just wild. It also looks like reality is bending and warping around the giant behemoth, and we can see this building bend and even turn blue. Another possible reference to Aesir, or am I crazy? I don't know. There's a lot of blue going on here that is unexplained. Also, we know Cereza is riding Gamora here as we can see a pink glow on his head. That's Cereza in her pink serious mode. This is a grander version of riding Diomedes in Bayo 2, and I just love this. This is going to be so awesome. There is one more important scene to talk about in the trailer though, but really quick, I want to make one thing crystal clear. The shot of Gamora going to do a slash towards this giant behemoth parallels that of Bayonetta going up against Gamora as he's about to slash her in her timeline. Lastly, we see some sort of dimensional vision hole take us to the scene of the Red Moon from the first Bayonetta 3 trailer. This means that these three scenes are happening at the same time, so keep that in mind as we continue. Could it be that all of these wacky events are taking place because of Bayonetta dying in one of the timelines? Or perhaps they were sparked by something that happened in the main timeline, namely Bayonetta herself splitting the realities when she brought Cereza back to her time period. One thing's for certain, Rodin did mention that the balance of powers that keep things in check doesn't feel right, and I think we're seeing the true fruits of that here. Those are just my educated guesses. But as for the last scene, the 2022 release date gets slashed and burns to ash. Some sort of firepower then, huh? This also calls back to something getting torn in half from a certain other Bayonetta trailer we know pretty well. Yep, the Crone Bayonetta from the original Bayonetta 3 trailer. This insinuates that this is the person who rips Bayonetta in half somehow in the first trailer. I think now we can safely glean she was sliced in half. This mysterious figure looks to a red moon, once again calling back to that first Bayonetta 3 trailer, and a certain cat doll named Cheshire is dangling from atop the figure's katana. But the real question is why? What connection could this person have to Cereza? Why keep Cheshire on the sword? Why do they specialize in a sword? Why are they angry? Why do they have fire powers? Why do they have spiked studs adorned on their garments? Why do they have a paw print on their katana? And who is this? Well, this is your third and final foreshadowing to another video I'll be doing soon. What? I have to leave you wanting more somehow. Just know I have plenty of insight for you, and I'm so excited to share it all. In the meantime, please share this ultimate analysis around to spread excitement for Bayonetta 3. We're all in this hype boat together, and we should show each other support and positivity. That being said, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to help me out with those evil YouTube algorithms. And I'll catch you all in the next video very soon. Until then, peace